So thank you all so much for joining us. I'm going to get started because we only have an hour and we really want to get on to Shane's workshop because I think it's going to be so interesting. I'm going to share my screen just really quickly and I'm going to tell everyone a little bit about what biosphere reserves are. So if you haven't joined us on one of our webinars before, we just want to give you a little information about the kind of work that myself and Dean do and why we're here setting up these webinars and trying to get you engaged in nature and culture. So UNESCO Biosphere Reserves, they are a global network, and biosphere reserves are really centered around nature conservation, but it's not just about nature conservation. It involves how people live in the area, how they make food, what kind of businesses exist there, and how people use the area for recreation and to earn a living as well. So it's about how nature and culture connect. So it's about the interaction between people and their environment and trying to do that in what we call an environmentally sustainable way, which, to put that simply, means a way that doesn't damage the environment that we're living in. Now, I get asked a lot about UNESCO. UNESCO is the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization. I'm sure that will come up in a pop quiz at some stage and people will be so grateful that I keep repeating this to them. So you all know what UNESCO stands for. Now, biospheres are made up of 3 separate areas. So as we said, there's an area that's always focused on nature conservation, and that's the core area, which is usually in Ireland a protected area as well. And then around that, we have what we call buffer zones and transition areas. And these are areas where we start to see a lot more human activity and where we start to encourage that environmental sustainability that we were talking about earlier. Now, globally, so all over the world, there are 714 UNESCO biosphere reserves, but there are only 2 in Ireland. So we have Dublin Bay Biosphere, which is where Dean is based, and we have the Kerry Biosphere Reserve, which is where I'm based, down here in the southwest. So the Dublin Bay Biosphere, loosely put, is around this area here. And there's some beautiful maps you can find. I really recommend you looking at the Dublin Bay Biosphere website if you want more information, because there's loads of videos and loads of information on that. So there's a protected area around Bull Island, and there's a lot of activities you can see. It's actually really unique in that it's one of the only biosphere reserves that has a capital city right at its center. So it's a really interesting place for Dean to be working in, trying to encourage all of that sustainability and nature connection. So where is the Kerry Biosphere Reserve? Well, the Kerry Biosphere Reserve is actually a landlocked biosphere reserve. So it's around the center of the county here, around Killarney. So here's a map you can see. So the red section in the middle is Killarney National Park, which is a protected area for nature conservation. And then the brown areas you can see around that are the buffer zone. And we actually have Ireland's highest mountain, Carrauntoohil, right in the middle of our biosphere reserve around here. And then the green area here is the transition zone. So that's where we see a lot of our towns and a lot of our human activity. So that is a whistle-stop tour of the biosphere reserves of Ireland and an introduction to what biosphere reserves are. So I'm going to stop sharing now, and Dean is going to share some information about an exciting competition that we have running in both biospheres.
Yeah, so in the Kerry and Dublin Bay Biosphere, we're running a writing competition, which is handy as we've got this writing workshop. That competition actually closes on Friday for the Dublin Bay Biosphere. I think in Kerry it might be a little bit longer.
The 24th. We've got extra time in Kerry. Okay. We like to take things easy.
Fantastic. Okay, very good. And we're asking young people to write up to 500 words about something that involves nature or conservation, but also involves one of those 2 biospheres. So if you're able to write something a little bit about Kerry Biosphere, you can enter Eleanor's competition. If you can write something that includes something about the Dublin Bay Biosphere, you can enter our competition. And there's some fabulous prizes. The overall winner will receive a goodie bag for everyone in their class. We're also in the Dublin Bay Biosphere running a Biosphere Award. So the winners of our competition will also get some support, some additional support to help them earn a Biosphere Award, which is a really exciting badge. I'm going to have to show you now. Oh, he reaches under his desk. So you get to win these to put on your school bags. Oh, this is not showing up very well, is it? Oh, come on, come on, come on, come on.
Put it,
There we
yeah,
go.
right in the middle of your face,
With
like
these,
an eye patch.
to put on your school bags or on your jackets or whatever else you want to do with them. So fantastic. So there's really good competition. I encourage that. Now, hopefully, everyone's got their pens and pencils handy, because there is most definitely going to be some writing involved in this workshop. So Shane, I'm really looking forward to this. I think it's over to you, buddy.
Okay, thank you. I should introduce myself first of all. My name is Shane Casey, and I'm from a little village in North Clare called Fenor. I think I saw Fenor popping up in chat there. And we're very lucky in the school in Fenor, because if you look out the windows in the front, you're looking out across Fenor Beach and Galway Bay. If you look out the back, you're looking across Steve Elba, and on either side of you, you've got the limestone landscape of the Burn. So I'm kind of really fortunate in terms of where I grew up in North Clare in the Burn. And I used to be a biodiversity officer, and then I actually worked as biosphere coordinator in Dublin Bay as well. So I'm kind of well used to Dublin Bay UNESCO biosphere. But I also write, and I started writing when I was quite young, and I'm going to come into that in a few minutes. But I love writing, and I love writing about nature and trying to engage people, young and old, with the nature they find on their own doorstep. Because I've been quite fortunate to experience nature in Fenor and along Blackhead, and I want to try to share that a little bit. No matter where you're from, whether it's Kerry or Dublin or anywhere across the country, if you walk out your front door, you're going to find nature very close by. So that's what I want to try to showcase today. But I'm going to share my screen and try to get this show started. So. Yeah. I'm trying to just get this to.
Click on the slideshow at the top, Shane. Slideshow.
Yeah. I know there's a little screen in front of me that's stopping me from doing that. I'm just trying to remember how to prevent that from happening. Sorry about this now.
Technology is wonderful when it works.
It is. Sorry, it usually goes away for a few minutes to let me start. Not letting me at the moment. Can you see that as it is? And we might work from this. That's usually not a way to do it. Sorry, folks.
There's a little icon at the bottom of the screen. Will that work? You know, the little sort of projector stand along the bottom. If you go where it says notes, and then along those little icons, the last one.
The last one, yeah. There you go.
Yep, that one. If you click that one, that usually starts the.
There you go.
There you go. Yep.
Fantastic.
Great. Sorry about that technology. Okay. So I want to start off with a few tips about writing in general and nature in general. So the first tip that I have is that writing is a skill, and every skill needs practice. So if you take, for example, if a footballer taking a free kick, two of the top footballers at the moment is David Clifford in Kerry and Ian Rock in Dublin, and many more beyond that. But these guys are only the best because they practice a lot, and they don't just stand straight in front of the goal and take a shot. They try from every angle, from left and right, from close in, far out with their left foot and right foot. They practice over and over again, and that's what writing needs as well. You don't just try to write stories. When I was younger, I used to try to write poetry. I wasn't very good, but I used to try it because it's experience. I had a diary for a little while. I used to write in it every day. I used to try to write newspaper articles. I used to try to write fact sheets. When I was younger, I had a pet donkey, and I used to be mad about donkeys. So I wrote a little fact sheet about everything I could find about donkeys. This was before Google, so I had to look up encyclopedias and all sorts of newspapers and books. But the more you write and more different types of styles you write, the better you get. So practice and practice over and over again. You're not going to be Shakespeare the first time you start writing. It needs practice, and over time you get better and better. So that's the first tip. The next one is you need to research. I've written stories about mayflies, I've written stories about pygmy shrews, about hedgehogs, foxes, and so on. And before I start writing any story, I try to learn as much about those animals as I can. So look it up online, look it up in books and so forth, because that helps you develop your character and your story overall. So if you need to do your research, do your research. And don't be afraid to read as much about those animals as you can. The next tip is obviously to write about what you know. And what you know best is your own family, your friends, your hobbies, your pets. Like say, I used to write a lot about my pet donkeys and a pet sheep called Danny as well, and so on. So that's what I used to write about when I was younger. I used to write about the Burren landscape because I was out in it and looking at it. And what I always say, if you have a story that's good enough to tell a friend, so the person sitting to your left or to your right, if you have a story that's good enough to tell them, you should write it down, because that's the start of your story, and you can build and develop from there. So write about what you know. But today we're not going to focus on those. Today we're going to focus on nature and writing about nature. And the best thing about nature, in my mind, is that it appeals to all your five senses. You can physically see nature, you can see colors, you can see shapes, you can see movements, you can see the wind blowing through flowers, or you can see animals moving about, bees buzzing about, and so on. You can hear nature, so you can hear bumblebees buzzing, you can hear the wind rustling through the leaves. Down in Fenor, you can hear the waves crashing against the shoreline, as you can in Dublin Bay as well. In Kerry Mountains, you might well hear deer at certain times of the year, or other creatures scurrying about. You can smell nature. You can smell flowers all around you. If you go to a woodland, you can smell the kind of the mossy bark smell. Not all smells are particularly good. Some smells are not great. If you go to the shore beach when the tide is out and there's old seaweed on the shoreline, that doesn't smell very well. If you find some pup goats up the top of Fenor Mountain, then they don't smell very well either. There's a bit of a whiff of them, but there's all kinds of smells around nature. You can taste nature. There's blackberries on the bramble at the moment. There's hazelnuts coming on the hazel trees. Try not to eat grass. It's a good piece of advice, but yeah, certainly all types of nature has a taste, whether it's fish or the food you eat, it comes from nature, and so on. And then you can touch nature. So you have all sorts of textures, from smooth to rough to sharp to get out and get your hands into nature. Be careful, but get your hands onto the ground, onto trees, onto flowers, and feel nature. Next tip then is, when you can't go somewhere, think of somewhere you've been. And this is important for any of the teachers listening in today as well, because I know how hard it is to bring a classroom outside. We were very fortunate in Fenor. We were able to, the beach was just across the road, so we were able to go there. Or there was a green road that passed the school door, so we were able to go along there. But for a lot of schools, it can be difficult to get out and go somewhere. So when you can't go somewhere, think about somewhere you've been. Most people, most kids have been to the seaside. Some of them have been looking to go to a forest, or to a bog, or to the river, a hay meadow, a park, or a local landmark. But think about where you've been, and when you're thinking about that, what did you see there? Think about the colours. What did you hear? Did you hear birds? What did you smell? Anything? Did you touch anything? The textures? Anyone that's been to a park, I'm sure, has taken a tumble and fallen around the grass, or my 3-year-old son loves touching trees and leaves and all sorts of things, or collecting shells. And what were you doing there? Were you just going for a walk, or were you playing with friends, or were you going on an adventure with your family? Who were you with, and how did you feel? All those elements can be incorporated into your story. So those are just a few tips to get started. Now, Normally in a workshop like this, we would do a bit of interactive play just to get you thinking about nature. Now there's over 300 people on this Zoom call, so what I'm going to do, rather than throwing it out to the audience, I'm going to actually ask Eleanor and Dean to help me out. So it's a very simple game. It's called Odd One Out. So it's quite simply what's the odd one out of those three animals and why. So Eleanor and Dean, you want to have a go? Fox, rabbit, daisy?
I think this is an easy one, so I'm going to go for it. Hello, leave you for a hard one. So I'm going to say daisy because it's a plant. The other two are animals.
Yeah, simple ones to start. It's going to get a little bit harder, Dean. So I'm going to go on.
Hard ones for me.
Otter, dog, badger.
I would have to say a dog because that is a pet, and the other two are wild animals.
Yeah, very good. Butterfly, bumblebee, mayfly.
Well, butterfly and bumblebee are pollinators, but I kind of feel that mayflies can pollinate as well. Maybe not. No, I'm going to say mayfly.
Yeah, you're right in mayfly. You're probably right also in pollinators. The reason I had mayfly there is because they live in water. Mayflies live for up to 2 years as nymphs under the water, and then for one day they come to the surface and become adults and breed. Whereas bumblebees and butterflies, you'll find them in any meadows or woodlands. So that's where that one is. Holly, ash, yew.
I should really know my trees.
Well, see, yew's a conifer. Holly's prickly.
Holly's prickly. Well, ash is deciduous. So is that it then? That ash is deciduous and the other two are green all year round?
That's right, exactly. Ash is deciduous. The other two. Native Irish trees are fascinating when it comes to mythology and folklore. A lot of the trees we have, including these trees, used to be known as nobles of the wood, which meant that in ancient Ireland under Brehon law, that it was punishable to actually cut any of these down. They had a huge amount of importance attached to them for wood or for food, or just because of their connection to folklore, like hazel was the tree of wisdom, so you weren't allowed to cut those down. Whitethorn, hawthorn, often associated with fairies, so it was dangerous to get on the wrong side of the fairies. So a huge amount of folklore attached to trees. Swift, cuckoo, blackbird.
Cuckoo. What do you reckon? Do they lay their eggs in other birds' nests?
Yeah, the cuckoo, because it lays its eggs. I always think of the cuckoo as like not a very nice bird. Like it seems like quite selfish.
Yeah.
But is it also the blackbird because that lives here all year round and the other two migrate? Is that another reason that you can be the odd one out?
You're right in both counts. The blackbird is resident here all year round, whereas the cuckoo and swift come from southern Africa to every summer. And cuckoo can be heard across Benora. Not so much in other parts of the country anymore, but certainly the swifts are quite common in Dublin and various towns and cities across the country as well. But equally, you're right, they also don't build their own nest. The cuckoo often builds and lays its eggs in the nest of a meadowpipit or similar species. So that's the end of that game. We're going to get started with the writing for now. So I suppose it makes sense that for every story there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. Where you start, it kind of depends on the writer. Some writers start at the end and then go back to the beginning. I always prefer to keep it simple, start at the beginning, then write your middle, and then write your end. And that's what we're going to focus on today. So where do you start? Well, I always start with who's your main character, because they're the focal point of your story. And the important thing to remember when you're writing about a character is that the person reading your story can't see inside your head. So it's important to use your words to paint that picture and describe them in as much detail as you need. When you're describing your character, you don't have to describe every single part of them, but there are some key details that you will need that are pertinent to the story. So you do need to share with your audience what pictures you have in your head. So I'm going to just give you an example from some of my stories. It's a story about a bumblebee, first of all, called Queen Hannah. And Queen Hannah was a beautiful bumblebee with a golden crown on her head and a golden sash around her waist. But what really made her stand out from the crowd was a sandy-coloured tail. And you can see from the description, the gold ring on her head, the sash around her waist, and her sandy-coloured tail. Now, if anybody is interested in identifying bumblebees, you'll also know that you can tell different bumblebees by the colour of the tail. Some bumblebees have orange coloured tails, red coloured tails, white coloured tails, and that's how you tell them apart. We have about 22 native bumblebees that are very important for pollination here in Ireland, and the best way of telling them apart is by their tail colour. On the other side, then you've got the little hedgehog. Hazel was, without a doubt, the most beautiful hedgehog he had ever seen, with deep brown eyes that were filled with mischief. There's a lot less detail in that. It was very focused on the eyes and the mischievousness of her character. But that tells you a lot about the main character, and that's what your audience needs. Like I said, the reader can't see it your head, so you have to explain to them. If you start talking about your friend Tommy and nobody knows who Tommy is, well, then you need to explain what he's boys, whatever age, and so on. This is how I know him. He's a neighbour or whatever it is. So giving us as much detail as you need be. So I'm going to ask you to do a little game now. So if you got your pen and paper handy, and I'm going to give you 2 minutes to do this in your classes or at home. What I want you to do, there's 4 pictures on the screen. There's a little badger, a cygnet, a young swan, a little field mouse, and a frog. And what I want you to do is give them a name, first of all, because the name is quite important. Give them one feature that stands out. So it might be mischievous eyes, or it might be the field mouse's saucer-shaped ears, or it might be little whiskers on the badger, and give them one personality trait. Okay, so a name, one feature that makes them stand out, and one personality trait. And I'm going to give you 2 minutes to do that.
So Shane, when we're thinking about a physical characteristic, that means that you're just sort of describing how they look, right? So it like pick something about what they look like.
It is, and what you want to do is describe it in a way that's not basic. Like you don't want to say that take for example the little field mouse, that he has 2 ears, 4 legs, and a tail. Get a little bit more interesting. What are his ears shaped like saucers? Are his whiskers constantly brushing off the ground? Are using them to smell the little blackberry? In the little badger, I know most people won't remember the Lone Ranger with the bandana across, but maybe he's got a little mask on over his eyes. Or is the cygnet, he looks nice and peaceful, but under the water his legs might be going like crazy. And similarly with the frog, or his eyes just bulging out of his head like marbles. Okay, so 1 minute left.
This is a tough one. This is one that the teachers might want to go back to later and give more time to, because it's hard to think about all these animals and come up with names and traits and personalities as well.
Okay, 20 more seconds, and then we'll be moving on. Yeah, like you say, Eleanor, it does take time to think about it. Particularly about the name. The name of your character is very important. Sometimes it's personal to yourself. Like we have a snail in one of our stories, and my wife used to have a friend that used to be loved snails, collect them all the time. So, and their name was Sam. So when we got a chance to write about a story about a snail, we called the snail Sam. We also called the snail, a hedgehog, Roland, because the idea was that when he rolled up into a ball, his name became shorter to Rolly rather than Roland. So there's names are important. We have a pygmy shrew called Sheridan who became a hero, because I've never heard of a hero called Sheridan. It's not the type of name you normally associate with somebody being big and brave, but that was important for us too. So your name is quite important, and in the personality trait as well, it kind of gives you an insight. Are they shy? Are they quiet? Are they full of babble? A few people down in Kerry might be full of talk, full of conversation. Similarly with Dublin, are they athletic? Are they good at sports? Or are they very friendly? Are they kind? And so on. So those are the kind of personality traits that you might be looking at, because it gives you great insight into the character. Okay, now normally in this situation I'd ask for a few volunteers from the audience, but again we have about 300 people, so it might be a bit chaotic if we do that. So Eleanor and Dean, I'm going to ask you for yours instead in this case, and then perhaps the teachers can share a little later on from their classrooms. But Dean, do you want to kick off?
So I've written Freddy the Frog didn't like his shiny, slimy coat. He wanted to be like other animals. He wanted a coat of feathers or fur. Some would say he was a little mixed up, but he just wanted to experience different things.
Very good, Dean. Fantastic. Eleanor, you've got a...
I've got a hard act to follow there, Dean.
Sorry, I should ask you first.
So I like the duck. I think they're super cute, and my mom really likes ducks as well. So I wrote about the duck, and I called her Alice because she made me think of Alice in Wonderland. And I said she has a mischievous look in her small dark eyes, and that was my physical characteristic and personality trait for the duck.
Very good, fantastic. Yeah, so it takes time to develop characters. You have to think about them over and over again. When I'm writing a story, I can't just sit down and write the entire story. It can very often take a few days, a few weeks, or even a few months. Sometimes I have to start writing a story and go away from it and come back to it to get a better picture of what I'm trying to explain. So don't worry about it if you don't get it on the first go, because sometimes creating your character takes time. But for any teachers listening in, ideally, like I say, you'd get out and you'd actually see it in nature firsthand, and you get inspired from being out in nature. But sometimes that's not possible. So if you get some pictures of animals like these, and then there's infinite amount of different creatures you can write about, that kind of can act as a very useful tool to stimulate a bit of imagination. So the next bit then is, where's your story set? And that's the great thing about nature, is that you'll always find an animal in a particular habitat, or hopefully in the right habitat. You might find say puffins along the cliffs of Moher. You might find red deer down in Killarney National Park. You might find seals in Dublin Bay, and that's where, if that's your main character, then maybe that's where your story will be set. But these are just a couple of examples from my own stories, just to kind of get you into the mindset of what I might be talking about. So, second paragraph. Tara lived in a hedge at the end of a little garden, a hedge full of hawthorn that exploded in white blossoms every spring and juicy red haws every autumn. It was a hedge full of activity. Pygmy shrews and rabbits hid in the undergrowth, while caterpillars and shieldbugs crawled among the leaves. Some lived their entire lives in a hedge, while others were just passing through. So hedgerows, and particularly whitethorn hedgerows, are probably the most common type of hedgerows in the country. If you drive down most roads in Ireland, you're going to find a whitethorn hedgerow. But it's thinking about the hedgerow in different seasons. So springtime they'll have the white blossoms, autumn time they'll have the red haws, and throughout that the hedgerow there'll be the ground layer on the ground, the canopy layer on the top, and what's going on in the middle. So different creatures live in different parts of your hedge. So your setting can be very, very small, like a hedgerow, or it can be huge open landscape like the Kerry National Park, the mountains, the reeks down there. So it can be big or small. But here's another one. It's an estuary, and of course, you know, an estuary is where a river meets the sea. The estuary was a magical place where the river met the sea and exchanged gifts. The sea would bring golden grains of sand, while the river carried little sediments of silt. Then the swirling waters mixed the sand and silt together to create great expanses of mudflats. And hidden in a nutrient-rich mud, there was a thriving community of curious creatures. Little crabs scurried sideways across the surface and hid among the eelgrass. Tiny mushrooms spurred under the mud near the surface, while cockles and mussels dug a little deeper. So that just gives you a sense. And if you ever go out to Dublin Bay, and I know there's a few schools out there, when the tide is out, you'll see huge expanses of mudflats. We have, of course, a river in Fenor as well that flows down into the Fenor beach. Not quite mudflats down there, but you see where the rocks are down along the one side of the beach. So it's in our stories, we're trying to, like I say, engage kids with people with the nature on their own doorstep. So I'm trying to keep it as real to life as possible. You don't have to keep it to real in your stories. If you want to personify your animals or your characters, then do so. I try to avoid and put them in clothes or make them stand upright with glasses and so on. I try to keep it real to life so that when people go out and see them in nature, they'll actually recognize what they are. And the same with the habitats. But your habitat can be completely fictional if you want. There's many great authors that can create universes that aren't based on what we have, from whether it's Harry Potter or Star Wars or whatever it is. So it's up to you. But when you're writing about nature, like I say, you can step outside your back door and you can see it in front of you and write about what's there. So here again, it's another exercise for you. We're going to give you 2 more minutes for this. And what we want you to do, there's 4 pictures on the screen. There's a little river through woodlands, a little swampy marsh, grasslands, and then a wider river. So take 2 minutes. What we want you to do is seasonal color. Sorry, now my screen isn't letting me see that at all. But it's a seasonal color, and what lives there, what colors can you see, what sounds can you hear. So a seasonal color, a sound, and sorry, what smells can you get? Okay, so you're going to get 2 minutes. Remember your 5 senses. When you are out in this landscape, in this setting, what are your 5 senses gauging?
So Shane, for this one, are we using the character that we had in the last slide? So we're sort of like following on the story here. Okay, cool. Exactly.
So you had your little duck. So they might be in the swampy marsh, or they might even be in the river. Dean might be in the marsh or the little stream in the woodland as well. If you pick the badger, you might find them in the grass, or certainly the dormouse, the little field mouse will be scurrying through that long grass. That long grass would be fantastic for the field mouse because it creates a bit of shade and shelter for them as well. And you can see the tall flowers, the daisies and dandelions. They're probably waving in the bit of summer breeze. So in one of our stories, we have a little marsh that's surrounded by flowers of every colour of the rainbow. So purple loose drifts, yellow flag iris, and so on. Blue forget-me-nots. So it's a way of kind of opening up that landscape, creating that picture in your reader's head because again, all they're looking at are words. So your words have to paint a picture. So as the more you can make them feel and experience what you're seeing in your head, the better. So the colors, the shapes, the sounds, the smells, bring it to life through your words. Okay, so 1 minute left.
So books can take months and months to write, and we're trying to pull these sentences together in 2 minutes. So they're going to be okay, but certainly worth practicing on and refining at a later stage. I got you.
Well, this is it. Thankfully, when teachers go back, when this is over, teachers can go back to their classes and spend a little bit of time. Spend an entire day if you want, doing just the character. Next day, focus on the setting or habitat and so on. And keep in mind that through our books and particularly online, we have support materials for teachers available to our website, shanecasey.books.ie, that actually help, I suppose, allow teachers to engage this type of workshop with the curriculum, particularly the SESE curriculum and the English, the language curriculum. And so it's a very useful handbook on our website called Mrs. Teal's Teacher's Handbook on our website. And like I say, all our stories, they give you examples for higher order questions for different activities through with your classes to engage them with the nature on their own doorstep. So very useful resource to have.
Shane, Miss McCarthy there has asked, will this presentation be available? Is that possible to be able to send out to schools that have registered?
Yes, I believe it's being recorded at the moment, and I'm sure Eleanor will circulate.
We'll have it on YouTube, yeah. But not can we send the presentation as well, or would we just direct them to YouTube?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, no, I can send the presentation to Eleanor and yourself, and then you can circulate it to whoever. It's no problem at all.
Fantastic. That's brilliant. Thank you.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I'll be able to link it through so everyone gets a follow-up email. So any of the links, like the link to Shane's website with the teacher's handbook and to the YouTube recording and to the presentation, I'll include all those so everyone will get a copy afterwards.
Okay, we've just had a whole load of questions asking the same thing, so that sounds okay. So should we get on with our stories? Oh,
we will. Now, before I ask you guys to give your example, let's just say one more thing. Is that nature changes throughout the year. So with every season, in spring, in summer, in autumn, in winter, if you go through woodland in autumn, obviously the leaves are changing colour and they're falling down. In springtime, it's completely bare, but towards the late spring, you're going to have things like bluebells, wood anemones, and then towards the end of spring and beginning of summer, you start to see the new leaves coming out on the trees and those flowers disappearing. And in the middle of summer, then you have canopy completely closed. So nature changes throughout the year. So when you're thinking about your stories and your setting, also think about what time of the year it might be set if you're talking about nature, because that's obviously influences what you might see and experience. Okay, so Eleanor, we might start with you this time.
Okay, so I chose the picture down at the bottom with the bridge and the little heron in it for my little duck. And I said it was a cool, grey, misty morning in summer. It was really quiet with just the sound of the water lapping against the bridge, and the air smelt fresh with the promise of sunshine later. And my little duck Alice was getting up early to wash off the dust and to search for some breakfast.
Fantastic. I love the promise of sunshine. Sometimes, and Finora's the same as well. I'm sure parts of Kerry are. Sometimes you wake up in the morning and there's a mist right down to the ground, and you're hoping it's just going to lift and the sun break through. So that's a lovely way of putting it. So Dean?
Okay. So the autumn leaves blazed with colour. Oranges, reds and purples assaulted Freddie's eyes as he hopped along the riverbank, enjoying the seasonal smells, when suddenly an orange leaf fell from a tree and stuck to his back. Boy, did he like his new coat.
Oh, wow. Very good. And perfect for this time of the year as well, when the leaves are starting to change colour as well. Lucky you didn't choose the same picture as Eleanor, because that heron will probably eat your product as
Yeah.
well. Yeah.
Stay clear.
That's important to remember. Okay, that's great. So we move on. What happens next? The middle of you got your start of your story, your character, and your setting. Now it's the middle of the story where the adventure happens. And it's great to write about nature, because in nature, characters are often looking for food, or for shelter, or for a mate. So sometimes it can be easy to create a story based on those. They might have friends they go for play with, or so on. But very often it's food, shelter, and a mate in the middle of the story. And in your adventure, you have action. Action is the most important part of your adventure, and the words you use when you're describing your action are also quite important. So if you take a simple action like the man walked down the street, well, that's fine. It's not particularly interesting. But if you change one word in that sentence, so you have the man ambled down the street, but he was taking his time. He was in no rush. He was very relaxed. So you get a sense about what that man is about. Or maybe the man stumbled down the street. You might be wondering, why is he stumbling? Is he hurt? Is he injured? What's wrong with him? What's causing him to stumble? Or the man skipped down the street. Well, you must be happy. Did he get good news? Is he going somewhere exciting? Is he going to see a friend or something? Or the man snuck down the street. What's he up to? Is he doing something he shouldn't be doing? Or is he trying to sneak up on something? Why is he sneaking? Who is he sneaking away from? Or the man darted down the street. Well, he must be in a rush if he's darting. What's he in a rush to, or running away from? So your action words are quite important, and try to use as many different types of action words to gauge a sense of the atmosphere of your adventure, of what's going on. Okay, so that's quite important. So it's quite difficult to I suppose give you any prompts for what happens next, because you have your character and you have your setting, but there's a few questions that can help. So who does your character meet? So for example, Dean, who does your frog meet with his orange coat? Or Eleanor, who does your little duckling meet when the sun finally breaks through? Is it a friend or is it a foe? What do they do together? Do they go playing? Are they fighting? Do they go somewhere? And who does what, and maybe why? The why part takes a little bit more time to tease out. But I'm going to give you 2 minutes again. And again, you're focusing on the character that you've already started and the setting. So you've got your start of your story done. Now it's the middle part of your story. So you're going to get 2 minutes again. So think about, who does your character meet? Is it a friend or is it a foe? What do they do together? Do they play, fight, go somewhere? And who does what or why? So 2 minutes to come up with the middle of your story. So a bigger challenge than before, but we'll see how you get on, okay? So again, this is where your imagination becomes important, and also where getting experience in nature. Very often I go out for a walk and I see something that just triggers a story in my mind. It might be one time it was just a song thrush hopping along the garden looking for earthworms. It's very, very clever the way he does it. He kind of pops along and tilts his head to one side, listening for an earthworm. And I'm sure the earthworm is on the ground, saying completely still, hoping that the song thrush doesn't hear him moving about. So it's a way of using your imagination for this aspect of the story. So you've 1 minute left. And of course, for anyone under 12 years, sometimes when we get a bit older, we try to create adventures that are very kind of big and kind of fascinating, I suppose. But when you're under 12, what's fascinating to you might be meeting with your friends, going to play football, or going to for riding a bike, or whatever it is. So it doesn't have to be anything mad exciting. It could be quite simple. You might decide to meet with your friend and have a tea party, or whatever it is. So it doesn't have to be mad exciting, but it just has to move on from your character and your setting. Okay, so 20 seconds left, and then I'm going to call on Eleanor and Dean. Okay. Okay, Eleanor.
Okay, so we're back with my little duckling Alice in the river. So within minutes, all the ducks from the river are up and about, searching for food along the banks. Alice meets her friend Chloe, who her mother says has exactly the same mischievous look in her eyes as Alice does. The two best friends swim giggling away from their mothers, who were busy chasing bugs on the bank, and went off to explore under the bridge.
Fantastic, very good. I might share with you a story that I heard from two little girls a few years ago, who are best friends. One of them had a story about a horse, and the other one had a story about a unicorn. And the horse, and in her story, went to her friend the unicorn to have a play date in magical fairyland, and the unicorn had invited the horse to come for a play date in magical fairyland. So the two little girls were actually writing two versions of the same story, which I thought was fantastic. But it just reminds me of your friend. Your
That's fantastic.
Story. Okay, Dean.
So I've definitely struggled with this one, so we'd need to go back and revise, but that's fine. So here we go. So Freddie's new coat gave him confidence. Maybe he'd finally meet a girl frog. Suddenly a pair of eyes could be seen poking out of the water. It was Freya. So Freddie strutted rather than hopped towards the most fancy frog in the pond.
Very good, Dean. Fantastic. So looking for a mate. So yeah, very fantastic. I wonder if she's going to return his affections. We'll have to wait and see for the end now to find out that. So yeah, like I say, this is it's the most important part of your story, but also very often your most difficult, because you have to use your imagination a little bit. And again, for any teachers listening, take your time and do this at a later date as well, just to kind of expand on it. But it's quite important to develop your creative writing skills. Okay. So the final part then is, how does your story end? Which character is the hero, or is there any hero? Does everyone live happily ever after? Again, for anyone under 12, they'll often know that the quickest way that an adventure ends is when the school bell rings and you have to go back in after school break. Or in the evening times, your mother or father might call you in for dinner, and that's the adventure over. And that's how your adventure ends, well and good. Or if the game you're playing just comes to an actual end, fantastic. Maybe you have a hero, maybe you don't. Maybe in Dean's story, the female frog returns her affections, and they have a brood of frog spawn and thousands of tadpoles next spring, or maybe they don't. In Eleanor's story, I'm not sure what Chloe and your little duckling are going to do, but it sounds like they're both up to mischief, so it could be an interesting into your story. So I'm going to give you 2 minutes again for how does your story end. When they meet their friend, or what to do, what happens next to wrap the story up. Do you have a hero, or do they all live happily ever after? So you're going to get 2 minutes to try to finish your story.
I think this is the hardest part, trying to imagine how to close the story.
It is, and again, this is where I find challenging as well sometimes, that I start a story and I can't finish it. So I have to leave, to go away for a little while, maybe go away for a day or a week or a month, and eventually come back to it. And sometimes when I do come back to it, I actually rewrite parts of it. That actually, if I change this middle part of the story, then the ending makes more sense. If I change this feature characteristic of the main character, then the ending can be a little bit easier. So it can be a challenge, but it's something that you just need to practice. And again, the ending doesn't have to be a cliffhanger or anything like that. It can be very simple, that they finish their game and went home. I used to give an example of a hedgehog. There was a hedgehog in a woodland, and he was a fox came up to the hedgehog, and the hedgehog wasn't sure whether this fox was going to be friendly or not. He had a feeling that the fox was going to try to eat him. So the hedgehog started to running away, but he wasn't as fast as the fox. So instead of that, he decided to curl up in a ball with his spikes out. So that was the middle of the story, and how the story ended is that the fox kind of approached, got a bit too close, sniffing, and poked his nose on the hedgehog spikes, and ran away, scampering, and then the hedgehog was happily continued on his day. So that's how the story ended. Okay, 1 more minute, and then we'll call on Dean and Eleanor again. And of course, sometimes your story doesn't end. Maybe there's another adventure coming up the next day. Pause it for a little while. That's why we have in books we have sequels. Okay. Maybe we'll kick off with Dean this time.
Okay, so Freya was definitely interested. She croaked loudly. Now, initially I had fluttered her eyelids, but that wouldn't be realistic. So it must be my new coat. What Freddie didn't realise was the leaf had fallen off some time ago. All he needed was a little confidence.
Very good. That's a lovely kind of confidence booster. Yeah, fantastic. Eleanor?
Okay. So we have Alice and Chloe, and they've headed off to the bridge. So under the bridge was darker, and the background noise dropped lower, as if the two friends had been transported to another world. Suddenly, a large beak appeared, followed by a gentle splash created by a large claw on a spindly leg dropping slowly into the water. The two friends froze. Was this a new friend, or had their mischievousness led them into trouble? Suddenly, there was a huge gust of wind. The two friends shrieked, turned, and raced back to the protection of their mothers. And from the safety of the bank, they turned to see the heron gently rising up into the sky.
You're gone on mute there, Eleanor.
Got mute.
In the middle of the story and everything, cliffhanger. So Alice and Chloe realized the scare they had was just the heron heading off back to the coast for the day. And their mothers were laughing.
Fantastic.
Wow.
That's fantastic, Eleanor. Well done. That's great. Like I say, normally we would ask people to volunteer, but we've over 300 people taking part. So hopefully the teachers in classrooms can get volunteers from their classes maybe after the workshop, and see how everybody did. And again, you have you'll have the workshop, the presentation to try it again. And again, you also have to resources, and we do this type of workshop through the Mrs. Teal's Teacher's Handbook that's available on our website, shanecasey-books.ie. So hopefully you'll be able to do this yourselves in your own classrooms at your own time, over and over again until your students are Shakespeare's. That would be fantastic. But at this stage, one final thing is about illustrating your story and creating a book. Because at this stage now, you probably have about 4 or 5 pages of a book. Every page has a book, and each page, particularly in children's books, have a corresponding picture. So, for example, in a story that I've done before, there's a fox called Fintan. He lives in a woodland, so that's the second picture. He meets a rat called Robinson and decides to try to catch the rat in picture 4. But how the story ends is that the rat wiggles and squirms until he escapes down a burrow, and the poor fox Fintan is left feeling a bit hungry. So for the rest of the day, or maybe tomorrow, you can maybe take the stories you've written this morning and try to illustrate each page. So your first page is your character, second page is where's your story set, third page is the middle of your story, who did they meet, what's the adventure, and then the fifth and sixth page maybe how did your story end. So it's a great way of adding to the workshop here today. And of course, if you do that, then you can submit it to Eleanor and Dean as part of their competition. I might hand you back to them in a moment, but I'm just going to explain a bit more about the competition. But I'm just going to leave you with a couple of other final tips. Read everything. Doesn't matter what you read, whether it's the newspaper or a book or anything at all. Just read everything. Listen to how people talk. The way people talk often influences how I write. Because you pick up lovely sayings in different parts of the country that you don't get anywhere else. So there's certain sayings down in Kerry that you won't hear up in Dublin or up in Clare or Mayo or so on. So listen to how people talk and maybe use that as a way of explaining part of your story. Write anything and everything, whether it's poetry, whether it's a diary, your blogs, fantastic. I didn't have blog when I was growing up, it's just a diary. Write newspaper articles or fact sheets. And most importantly of all, get out and do stuff, get out into nature. When you get out next time, try to immerse all your 5 senses with nature. So start touching stuff out in nature, whether it's grass or trees or rocks. There's plenty of rocks up in Fenor. So get out and start touching stuff. Try to listen, whether it's the waves crashing against the shoreline or whether it's the sound of the wind and so on. Smell, taste, and so on. But most importantly of all, get out and do stuff. So
Fantastic.
That's kind of it from me. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Shane. So just about the competition, just before we rock and roll, there was a question there earlier. Can people from other areas enter the competition? Absolutely. We'd love to hear from you. The stories need to have some connection to either the Kerry or Dublin biospheres, that's all. If you want any hints and tips, check out our YouTube channel, look at our website just for ideas of what's happening in there. That might give you some ideas for what's important to us. So if you want to enter the Dublin Bay Biosphere competition, you need to send your entries to info@dublinbaybiosphere.ie. That's info@dublinbaybiosphere.ie. And Kerry?
Kerry Biosphere. And so for Kerry Biosphere, our competition's closing a little later on the 24th of September, and you can send your entries to kerrybiosphere@skdp.net. I'll make sure that I include all those details in the follow-up email as well. So don't worry if you weren't able to get the email addresses down. I'll send you out an email tomorrow. It will go out automatically to all the emails that registered, and I'll have details of Shane's books, his website, the presentation, the recording of this video so you can watch it back, and all the details of how to enter the 2 nature blogger competitions.
Fantastic. Shane, I just want to say thank you so much. That was really interesting. It's really got me thinking about, how to write about nature and to include a lot more than just the story itself, to be able to paint that picture. I think that's really valuable. So thank you so much. I really, really appreciate your time.
No problem. Thank you.
Been fantastic. Shane, there's a lot of people sending in their thanks in through the Q&A session there. So from 4th class in Caribbean County, Galway, from 4th class in NSP, and Nora Buckley says thank you so much, and Avril Tula said thank you so much as well, and Cultra National School. So everyone's very, very grateful for your time this morning. It's been fantastic to share it with you. I'm definitely thinking now, right, I could write a book. Let's go and have an adventure and write about it.
Yeah. Fantastic. Thank you very much. Everybody can write their stories, and hopefully the workshop will give you a good starting point for writing your own books in future. So thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, and thanks to all the classes that joined us. I hope you enjoyed it and enjoy the rest of your day. And it's just gone 10:30, so we're going to leave you go now and get back to the rest of your day. Bye.
Bye.